It started on a quiet Saturday, the kind that looks harmless from the outside. Rain tapped a soft rhythm on the kitchen window, and the kettle hummed like it knew the exact pitch of my heartbeat. I was wiping a mug with a clean towel, feeling the smooth rim under my fingers. The house smelled like ginger tea and the faint lemon from yesterday's cleaning. Everything felt steady, familiar. I thought I knew my life. Her phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up to silence the vibration, the way I always did when we were trying to keep the house calm. I wasn't snooping. I didn't mean to see anything. The message flashed on the lock screen for a full second before dimming. 2 lines that carved a slow, cold line through my chest. Thinking about last night. I can't get you out of my head. The name above it was my father's. My father. The same hands that used to lift me onto his shoulders at the park. The same voice that used to whistle on Sunday mornings. The same man who told me love meant showing up. The room tightened around me. The kettle clicked off. In that small silence, I could hear my own breath and the soft hiss of rain and the tiny traitor sound of my heart folding in on itself. "Hey, can you pass me my phone?" she called from the living room. Casual, sweet, like always. I looked at the phone again, put it face down, and walked it to her with steady hands I did not recognize. She smiled, said thanks, and kissed my cheek as if nothing had changed. Maybe for her, nothing had changed. For me, the shape of the world bent without anyone noticing. I made the tea, 2 cups, the way she liked. When I carried them in, a gust of wet air slipped through the front door as it closed behind my father's memory. Not his body. He wasn't there, just the idea of him. The idea that had been alive in our house without my consent. I set her cup on the table, sat with mine, and watched the steam soften the space between us. I didn't ask any questions that day. I didn't make a scene. I watched the garden through the window, rain glossing the leaves, and I listened to her hum as she scrolled. I swallowed my tea and tasted metal. And while the water moved down the glass like thin silver threads, I made a choice. If this was the truth, then I would not break myself to hold it. I would plan my answer. I would plan something that would not shout, would not slam doors, but would change everything all the same. I would plan my revenge, quiet, steady, and final. When I tell the story now, I start with the ordinary parts. It helps me breathe. It helps me remember that a life is not only made of the worst day or the hardest secret. Most of our days were simple. A quiet street, a small garden with mint and rosemary, 2 mugs on the kitchen shelf, the chipped blue one for me, the yellow one for her. We kept our shoes by the door and a basket for mail on the hall table. It was never fancy, but it felt like ours. I grew up in a town that smelled like wet pavement and fresh bread. My mother left when I was 11. Not because of a fight or a big scene. She left like a tide that pulled back and didn't return. My father did his best. He made scrambled eggs that were a little too dry and packed my lunches with notes that said, "Proud of you." He taught me to ride a bike in the empty school parking lot on Sundays. He cried once in the car when a song came on the radio that my mother liked. He turned the volume up so I would think the wind in the window made his eyes red. I pretended to believe him. He is a charming man. Mark is his name. People like him without trying. He has a way of focusing on you that makes you feel like a warm light has turned on. He remembers birthdays. He shows up with soup when you are sick. He hangs shelves straight and fixes leaky taps and lifts heavy boxes without being asked. There is a softness to him, and also
a hunger for being needed. As a child, I loved that about him. As an adult, I learned to watch it. I met Lena on a cool afternoon in late autumn. I was picking up a slice of apple pie to take to my father's house. He had just had a small procedure, nothing dangerous, and I wanted to bring something sweet. The cafe smelled like cinnamon and coffee beans. She stood ahead of me in line, hair tucked into a dark green scarf, laughing with the barista about a song on the radio. When she turned, she bumped my shoulder and almost dropped her cup. "Sorry," she said, hand on her chest, eyes bright. The sleeve of her sweater brushed my wrist, and I felt a simple, ordinary rush, like opening a window to cool air. We sat by the window. We talked about pies and music and why we liked rainy days. I told her I liked the sound of rain on the roof when I was a kid because it made the house feel smaller and safer. She said, I like the way the world is washed clean for a while. We were both a little awkward, both careful with our words. I put my number on a napkin, and she saved it in her phone with a little heart next to my name. She said, I'm Lena, as if we had already known each other for a long time. Our first dates were simple. Walks by the river with scarves pulled up to our chins, shared bowls of soup, a movie in a theater with 10 people and a broken heater, where we kept our coats on and laughed softly at all the wrong parts because we were warm next to each other. She told me she did graphic design. She worked from home for small clients. She liked good pens and neat lines, and the way a clean layout made her head feel clear. I told her I worked at the community center, after-school programs, paperwork that didn't scare me, and that I liked the steady rhythm of it. When I brought her home to meet my father, he made spaghetti and overcooked the garlic bread. He set the table with a pride that made me smile. He held Lena's coat as if she were delicate bone china. He asked about her work and her family and the books on her shelf. She told her parents lived 2 hours away and called too much and, in a way, not enough. He nodded like he understood. He laughed at her jokes. She laughed at his stories about me riding a bike into a bush because I could not turn the handlebars in time. The house was warm, the windows fogged, and I remember thinking, this is how it should feel. 2 people I love liking each other. We married 2 years later. Small ceremony, a garden strung with tiny lights, friends pushing chairs into place, and a woman from the community center playing violin in the shade of an oak tree. My father walked me down the aisle. His hands trembled just a little, and his eyes shone with that same wind in the window look. He said, "You deserve soft mornings," before he sat down. Lena read her vows from a folded card with a faint coffee stain on the corner. She said, I promise to choose you when choosing is easy and when it is not. I did not know that promise would be tested by her in a way I could not imagine. Our life settled into quiet patterns. We cooked together on Sundays, eggs with herbs from the garden, toast with butter and a pinch of salt. We argued about small things like how to fold towels or whether the dish rack should be emptied right away or left to air a little longer. We made up quickly, the way you do when the love is there and the stakes are small. In the mornings, I made tea and she made coffee. She liked to play soft music, piano, or something with acoustic guitar. The house smelled like toasted bread, citrus, and the clean cotton of freshly washed sheets. My father came by often. He said he liked the buzz of our house. He liked the sound of our lives. He would drop off extra tomatoes from a neighbor or a stack of magazines he thought Lena would enjoy for her design ideas. He would kneel in the garden and talk to the rosemary as if it were a friend. Sometimes he would fix things we didn't know were broken. "Your front door sticks," he'd say, rubbing the spot with a bit of wax. "There, listen to that." The door would slide quiet as a secret. Sometimes I caught a look or laugh between them that made me feel left out, but in a normal way, the way two people who like each other's company share an easy rhythm. They teased me about how slowly I chop onions, about my habit of saving tiny jars and using them for salt or thumbtacks. I felt lucky. I felt safe. There were signs, but signs are easy to circle in red after you already know the ending. Like the time she would text at the table and say, "It's you, Dad. He's asking about the recipe." Or, "He wants to know if we can move dinner to Saturday." I didn't think twice. They had each other's numbers. It made sense. We were a family that checked in, that asked, that coordinated. If I felt a small twist in my stomach, I told myself it was my old fear of being left, the tide pulling back, the little girl in me frightened of the door closing.
My father and I had gotten closer in those years. He moved to a smaller house across town after selling the old place, and he started a new habit of walking at sunrise. He would send me photos of the sky turning from gray to pink. He volunteered at the library, reading to kids on Wednesdays. He met friends for chess and lost on purpose because he liked the laughter more than the winning. He seemed content. I like to think we had built something that was steady and honest. Lena was good to me in small ways. She put notes in my coat pockets. She remembered when I had hard meetings and left a single square of chocolate on my pillow. She listened when I talked about a teenager at the center who was careful with anger, who needed a place to be gentle. She once painted our bedroom wall a soft blue while I was at work because I had said offhand that the color made me feel like calm water. I do not want to erase those parts. They were real. But there were also small fades. She grew quieter at night. Her phone seemed to live in her hand. If I reached for it to set an alarm, she would say, "I'll do it," with a smile that felt like a closed door. Sometimes she would take long showers and come out looking like her thoughts were somewhere else. I asked if she was happy. She would say, "I am. I'm just tired." I believed her. I wanted to believe her. I trusted my father completely. The idea of him doing something reckless with my life in his hands did not cross my mind. He had taught me to be careful, to be kind, to pay attention. He had told me once when I asked about my mother, "People are complicated, but love is simple. You do not harm the people you love." He said it while we were putting up a shelf for my books. He held the plank steady while I drilled, and I thought the whole world could be like that. Steady, held, sure. On the day of the message, the rain was a soft curtain. The house smelled like ginger tea and the lemon cleaner from the day before. Lena had left her phone on the kitchen counter. I was drying a mug, the one with the chip where my lip knew to avoid. We were alone. The TV murmured in the other room. The kettle clicked off. It was the sound of the text that drew my eye. Nothing more. A tiny buzz and a quiet day. I told myself it could be a misunderstanding. Maybe my father had sent a message to someone else and it had landed here by mistake. Maybe there was context I did not have. Maybe the word "last night" meant a movie or a dinner or an argument I didn't know about. My mind moved fast and also stood very still. I carried the phone to her, set it on the table, brought her the tea, and sat down. I watched her face as she lifted the cup to her mouth. She swallowed. She smiled. She did not look guilty. Maybe that is the strangest part of betrayal, the way ordinary love can sit on top of it, like a blanket over a hole in the floor. We ate dinner that night, in the hush of a house that doesn't know it is about to become a different house. I chopped onions slowly. She stirred the pot and wiped her eyes and laughed. "These are strong." I wanted to ask her if she was in love with my father. I wanted to ask if there had been touches, rooms, time I did not own anymore. But the questions felt too big and my voice felt too small. And I have always learned to wait when I am unsure. Waiting has been both my safety and my mistake. After we ate, I stepped out into the garden. The rain had slowed to a mist. The rosemary brushed against my jeans. I closed the back door gently and stood with my hands in my pockets. The air smelled like wet earth. The neighbor's dog barked twice and then stopped. I could see our kitchen through the window, Lena rinsing dishes, her hair pulled up with the clip, her throat moving as she swallowed. The garden held its breath. I held mine. Memories came like small birds landing on a fence. My father's hand on my shoulder at graduation, Lena falling asleep on my chest on a Sunday afternoon while the laundry machines hummed. The first plant we kept alive together. The way my father and Lena had hung string lights in the garden on our first anniversary because I had said I wanted to eat outside more. I stood there and let the birds land. I did not swat them away. I did not tell them to go. That night, I could not sleep. I lay awake listening to Lena breathe beside me, the slow in and out that had always calmed me. The clock ticked, rain tapped on the roof like soft fingers. My mind kept going back to the message, not the words, but the shape it made in my chest. I thought about my mother, her tide going out. I thought about the way my father had taught me to hold steady. I thought about what kind of person I wanted to be when life cut me open like this. There is a word I like, gentle. It doesn't mean weak. It doesn't mean you let people walk over you. It means you move with care. You choose your steps. You do not bleed on people who did not cut you. I decided to move gently. I decided to look for what was true. I decided to plan, not to damage, but to set things right. I did not know then what shape that plan would take. I only knew that I needed light and air and proof. Over the next days, I watched the small patterns. My father dropped by on Wednesday instead of Thursday and stayed a little longer, his hands busy with a loose hinge on the hallway closet. Lena put on lipstick to go buy flour. She smiled at me, kissed my forehead, said, "Back soon." Her perfume hung in the doorway after the door closed with that new quiet slide. I stood in the hall and listened to the garden. Even the birds seemed careful with their song. At work, I found it hard to focus. The papers looked too white. The words on the computer swam. I took a longer lunch and went for a walk around the block. The air smelled like rain moving away. I called my father to ask about a ladder he had borrowed. I listened to the tone of his voice. It was sweet as always, a little too eager to be helpful. He said, "I can bring it by tonight." And I said, "No rush." When I hung up, my hand shook. I did not tell anyone. Not my friend at the center who would have taken my hands and said, "Oh no." Not my neighbor who would have leaned over the fence with answers. I needed the quiet to hear my own voice. I needed the silence of the garden. I needed to watch the way the light came into our kitchen in the late afternoon, turning the countertop gold, the dust floating like tiny, honest stars. I thought about Lena's kindness, and also the way she had grown far away, like a boat slipping from its rope. I thought about my father's smile, and also the way he loved being needed. I asked myself what I owed to the truth and what I owed to my own heart. I did not want to burn down the house to escape it. I did not want to scream. I wanted to build a bridge to the other side of this river and walk across it with my head up. If I was going to plan anything, it would come from that place, not from spite, not from a wish to make them hurt as I was hurting, but from a wish to put the truth in the light, to let it breathe, to let it change the shape of our lives in a way that made sense. I would need patience. I would need a steady hand. I would need to be strong enough to ask the hardest questions and soft enough to hear the answers without breaking. On Thursday, I wrote in my journal at the kitchen table. The page felt like a shore I could stand on. I wrote, "I will not betray myself, even if they betrayed me." I wrote, "I will not be small." I wrote, "If this is true, I will bring it into the open, and I will walk away from what is not mine to carry." I closed the journal, slid it under the napkin basket, and made tea. The kettle hissed, steam rose. The garden looked back at me through the glass, steady and green. When Lena came home, she kicked off her shoes and smiled. "What's for dinner?" she asked. Her voice was light. I looked at her and saw the woman I married and also the woman who might be holding a piece of my life behind her back. I did not hate her. I did not hate my father. Sometimes that surprised me. I felt something else. Something like standing in a doorway and seeing a storm far out at sea moving toward the shore. You can't stop it. You can only decide what kind of shelter you will be. We ate pasta and talked about nothing and everything. We watched a show and laughed at the same parts. We brushed our teeth side by side. She reached for my hand in bed and I held it because on that night I still could. In the morning, the sun opened the blinds with soft gold. I made tea. She made coffee. The house smelled like toasted bread and clean air. We were still us, and we were also not. Now, when I think of the setup to all of this, I don't only see the red circles around the signs. I see two people trying to be happy, and a third who wanted to help and be loved. I see good intentions tangled with old needs. I see a family that was almost what it looked like from the outside. I see a daughter who believed in soft mornings. I see a wife who wanted to be chosen. I see a father who did not know how to stop reaching for warmth. And I see the quiet, steady woman I was becoming, standing in her own kitchen, listening to the kettle and the rain, getting ready to bring the truth into the light. The days after the message moved like slow water. On the surface, everything looked the same. The kettle hummed in the morning, the garden held its soft green. The sound of the front door, with that quiet slide my father had fixed, felt like a small, polite bow. But underneath, I was different. I had started holding my breath between moments. I began to carry a small notebook. Nothing fancy, just a thin lined one with a soft cover. I made 4 columns on each page. I wrote, "I saw, I heard, I felt, I will do." It was not about proof for a court. It was about anchoring myself to reality when the floor felt like it might tilt. I did not want to be cruel. I did not want to be wrong. I wanted to be awake. One afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with the mail basket and a pencil. The light came in strong and warm, turning the wood to honey. I opened the phone bill. We share a plan, the 3 of us on one family account, because it was cheaper and my father liked to keep life simple. I scanned the pages, not hunting, just looking. My throat felt dry. There were calls, many. Some quick, like the simple kind of check-in. Some longer, stretched out in the late evening, the way only 2 people who do not want to put the phone down do. There were texts at odd hours. Not constant, not enough to be obvious, but a thread that ran under the day. I ran my finger down the list of times. When I hit the nights, I could remember Lena's tired smile and my father's morning photos of pink skies. Something inside me folded in a neat, sad way. I closed the bill and placed it under the basket. I made tea, the ginger kind, and I stood by the window. The garden was still. A few drops hung from the rosemary like tiny glass beads. The steam from my cup curled up and softened my face. I felt the small, fluttering panic I had felt as a child when the tide pulled back. I took a breath. I wrote in my notebook. I saw. Call log. I heard. Nothing yet. I felt sad and steady. I will do. Wait and watch. Lena came home with a bag of flour and a smile that landed just short of her eyes. She slipped off her shoes with her foot and leaned in to kiss me. You okay? She asked lightly, eyes on my face in a way that felt both loving and careful. I'm okay, I said. It was not a lie. I was okay for that minute, rooted in place like a tree that has decided to grow where it is planted, even if the soil has changed. At the community center, I tried to stay in the soft rhythms that keep me steady. I typed. I printed. I set out crayons on a low table for a new art activity. A boy with a tired face drew a small blue house and then a line of tiny yellow stars above it. It's night, he told me without looking up. I nodded and felt my chest ache. Sometimes we tell the truth without knowing which part is the truth. Sometimes a drawing speaks out loud for us. That evening, my father dropped by with mint from his garden, cut in a small bundle, damp with the paper towel. He handed it to me like a bouquet. For your tea, he said. He smelt like the outside, like grass and a little like laundry soap. He smiled the way he does, that warm light. Stay for dinner? I asked, because that is what I would have asked any night. He looked past me toward the kitchen where Lena was standing with a wooden spoon. Only if I'm not in the way. You're not, she answered, smiling. You can star. They moved around each other in an easy dance. He washed a cutting board. She sprinkled salt with that little twist of her fingers I loved. They laughed when he spilled a few grains and made a silly face. I watched the window where the last light of day made the glass look like a dark mirror. In the reflection, we were a picture that would look perfect to anyone passing by. I asked a plain question while I wiped the counter. Are you both happy? They both answered at the same time. Yes, Lena said. Yes, my father said. It was gentle and easy. He leaned over and kissed the top of my head like he used to when I was small. Lena set the spoon down and touched my arm. If guilt lived in that room, it hid well. After he left, I stood at the door and listened for the sound of his footsteps softening down the path, then vanishing. The night pressed its cool face against the glass. I felt both full and empty. I washed 2 plates in water the temperature of a hot bath. I watched the bubbles gather and then fade. It is a little strange the way you can be inside your life and also standing just outside it, forehead against the window, watching. I did not want to search her phone. I did not want to be someone I didn't recognize. I wanted them to tell me. I wanted the truth to walk in through the front door like a guest who rang the bell. I waited. But waiting began to feel like a kind of slow, quiet burning. On a Saturday morning, Lena said she was going to the printer shop to check a proof for a client's brochure. She wore a blue shirt that made her eyes bright. She put on red lipstick and wiped a tiny smudge with her thumb. She stopped at the door and looked back. Do you need anything? I said bread if you pass by the bakery. No rush. My father texted me then. Can I borrow your hand drill? Hinges loose at my place. His messages always had that small, helpful story inside them. I said yes and set the drill by the door.
I sat at the table and drank my tea. The house was quiet. The sun made a square of gold on the floor. I picked up my notebook and wrote, I saw lipstick, drill request. I heard, nothing yet. I felt calm and cautious. I will take the drill myself. I drove across town, the drill on the seat next to me. My father's house is small, neat, with a bit of ivy trying to curl its way up the side. I had a key, a practical thing left over from when he had a minor surgery, and I checked on him. I knocked and waited. No answer. I checked my phone. No new messages. The air smelled like warm tar and cut grass. I put the key in the lock. I did not feel like a thief. I felt like a daughter bringing a tool. The door opened with a small sigh. "Dad?" I called gently. No sound answered me. Not even a radio left low. I stepped inside and closed the door softly behind me. The living room looked like always. Books in a neat stack on the side table, a blanket folded on the arm of the couch, a pair of reading glasses perched on a book like they were resting. In the kitchen, I set the drill on the counter. There were 2 mugs in the sink, with coffee rings drying into thin brown lines. One had a faint smudge of red on the rim. Lipstick. Not proof that breaks a life. People drink from cups. People wear lipstick. People visit. But the smudge sat there like a red flag in a small, silent field. On the back of a chair hung a dark green scarf. It was the same shade as the one Lena wore when we met in the cafe that first day. I reached out and touched the edge. The wool was soft. It could be any scarf. I told myself that. It could belong to anyone. But the way the knit bowed and then smoothed under my fingers felt exactly like hers. I stood, very still. The quiet in that house was the kind that collects after happy noise. It felt like laughter had been there and had just left. I could smell his soap. I could smell her perfume, faint and floral, a scent I know as well as my own pillow. I turned and walked out. I closed the door with care, the lock clicking like a small decision. In my car, I sat with my hands on the steering wheel. I did not cry. Tears would come later, like storms do when they are ready. For that moment, I felt a clear, cold ease. The truth does that sometimes. It hurts, and it also straightens your spine. I drove to the bakery. I bought bread. I came home. Lena was in the kitchen, humming under her breath. She held a white paper bag and smiled. "You read my mind," she said, holding up a loaf. "I got bread too." We laughed, soft and ordinary. Our hands brushed when we set the loaves down. I smelled the same perfume I had smelled in my father's kitchen. I closed my eyes for half a heartbeat and then opened them. "Perfect," I said. "We'll freeze one." Later, when she showered, I stepped into the garden. The late morning had turned warm enough for the rosemary to let out its scent. I pinched a sprig and rubbed it between my fingers. The oil stayed on my skin, sharp and green. The neighbor's wind chime sang a low, simple song. I listened until the water in the house stopped, and the door opened and closed with that quiet slide, and I wrote in my notebook. I saw lipstick, scarf.
I heard, shower, quiet. I felt, steady. I will do, make a plan. That phrase made me breathe easier. Make a plan. My plan would not be a storm. It would be a sunrise. It would put light on what was already there. I started making small, practical moves. I copied important papers and tucked them into a folder. I opened a new bank account at a credit union near the community center. The woman at the desk wore a necklace with a tiny silver bird. She smiled at me over the forms. "Any plans for the weekend?" she asked, the way people ask to keep the air light. I said, "Just some housework," which was true in its own way. I was cleaning my life, even if it did not look like that yet. At home, I printed the bill and slid it into a plain envelope. I cleaned the spice drawer and set aside a small box labeled spares. I wrote 2 letters, one with my father's name on the outside, one with Lena's. I wrote slowly, not to wound, but to say what was true. I wrote, "I loved you in honest ways." I wrote, "I will not make a scene." I wrote, "This is what will happen next." I also planned a dinner. My father's birthday was coming in a few weeks. We had talked about a small meal, just the 3 of us, because he does not like a fuss. I said nothing about changing that plan. I kept it simple. I thought of the table, the soft light, the clink of forks. I thought of placing 2 envelopes by 2 plates. I thought of the way a quiet truth can be louder than any shout. Days passed in a pattern that felt like a lullaby and a warning at the same time. Morning tea, work, messages, evening pasta, Lena's laughter at a show on TV, my father sending a photo of a sunrise with a caption that said, "The world is very awake today." I would look at the photo and think, yes, some of us are. One afternoon, I decided to test something in a gentle way. I texted my father, "Are you free at 4? Need help with a box at the center?" He wrote back, "Can I do 5? At the store now." 5 minutes later, Lena looked up from her phone and said, "Client wants to push our call to 5. I'll be on the porch then." The way she said client was the way she always said it. Light, practical. It made sense. I nodded. I wrote in my notebook. I saw, same time shift. I heard, store, client. I felt tired. I will do, be at the center at 4 anyway. At 4, I stood in the quiet hall at the community center, my hands on a heavy box of donated books. The building smelled like paper, pencil shavings, and floor cleaner. The light through the big windows was thin and kind. A little after 5, my father texted, "Still at the store. Tomorrow?" I typed, "Sure," and set the box down. I walked outside and the air moved across my face, warm and soft with early evening. The leaves whispered that sound they make like water in a shallow brook. I walked home the long way, past the park. The bench under the maple tree had 2 people sitting close in the soft light. They were turned slightly away, heads bent toward each other. I did not go closer. It is strange what mercy looks like sometimes. I turned down the side path and took the loop behind the baseball field, my feet crunching on small stones. The golden light held on for a few more minutes and then let go. That night, Lena fell asleep with her back to me, the curve of her shoulder a shape I could draw with my eyes closed. I moved my hand an inch away from her and kept it there, hovering, not touching. On the dresser, the yellow lamp made a small pool of warm light. I watched the wall, and then the ceiling, and then the paste of moonlight at the window. I breathed like the sea, in and out, in and out, nothing dramatic, just staying. I decided to visit the library where my father reads to kids on Wednesdays. I said it was to drop off a flyer for our after-school program, which was also true. The librarian, a woman with kind eyes and a cardigan the color of fog, waved me in. The children sat in a half circle, their little knees in a line. My father held a book with a dragon on the cover. His voice was soft and strong and had that lift of joy it gets when he reads a funny bit. I leaned against a shelf and watched him. A small girl with braids laughed so hard she clapped her hands over her mouth. Lena stood near the back, a camera in her hands, taking pictures for a new library poster. She wore that same blue shirt. She glanced at me and smiled. I smiled back. It could have been a sweet scene if I did not know what I knew. After, he hugged me in the quiet corner between picture books and puzzles. "You came," he said, as if the world were giving him a gift. "I did," I said, as if I were not giving him one. He held my shoulders. He said, "You look tired. Are you sleeping?" "Some nights," I answered. Lena touched my elbow lightly and said, "Want to grab a coffee?" Her voice was casual. Her eyes were difficult to read. We walked to the small cafe next to the library. The doorbell chimed when we entered. The place smelled like cinnamon, sugar, and the faint bitter edge of coffee beans. We ordered 3 drinks. The barista knew my father by name. "The usual?" she asked, smiling. I watched the two of them talk while we waited. Easy, familiar. Their rhythm felt like a song they had practiced. I wondered when I had stepped out of the room in the music. My father said something about a hinge, and Lena laughed, a warm, low sound. I did not feel anger. I felt like a piece of paper placed carefully under a glass, seen through, pressed flat, kept neat. At home, I pulled a small suitcase down from the top shelf of the closet. I spread it open on the bed. It smelled like dust and the ghost of airport halls. I put in a sweater, a pair of jeans, a book, my journal. I put in a small box with my grandmother's ring, the one I wore on my right hand when I wanted to feel close to women I no longer had. I closed the suitcase and slid it under the bed, next to a pair of shoes I rarely wore. I was not leaving yet. I was making sure I could. I began to cook less on purpose. I set the table for 2 some nights, as if my father might come by, and if he did not, as he often did not, we saved leftovers. "You're distracted," Lena said after a week of this. Not accusing, not even unsure, just noticing. "I am," I said. It felt good to say a plain truth. "Work?" she asked. "Partly," I answered. "And life." She nodded. Patient, kind. "Want to go for a drive?" she offered. "Get some air." We drove to the lake and sat on a bench. The water moved in a slow, silver skin. Ducks made their busy little tracks. She leaned her shoulder into mine. "I like the shape of us," she said quietly. "Me too," I said. And the sad thing is, I meant it. The shape of us had been good. It was just that a shadow had crept in behind it and moved along when we moved, copying us. Not our fault any more than a table is at fault for the way a light hits it. A few days later, I found a receipt in the car console when I went to get a pen. It was crumpled, a coffee shop logo at the top, 2 cappuccinos, a slice of lemon cake, timestamp 4:07 p.m., the same day I had stood in the hallway at the community center for waiting for my father at 4. Money isn't a smoking gun. People buy coffee. But all the little lines on my page began to connect, not in a wild, angry red web, but in a calm, quiet grid. I wrote in my notebook, I saw, receipt. I heard, soft laughter. I felt, done with doubt. I will do, set the table. On the day of the dinner, I woke early. The sky was a soft, low gray. I made tea and sat at the table with my journal and the 2 letters addressed to their names. I ran my fingers over the edges of the envelopes. The paper was creamy and strong. I wrote one more note, to myself this time. Remember who you are. Be gentle. Tell the truth. Leave with your head up. I did not tell them why the dinner mattered. I said, 7 okay? And they both said yes. I cut vegetables. I made a stew that likes to cook all afternoon and make the house smell like a warm hug. I baked a small cake with lemon zest because my father loves that brightness. I set 3 chairs, 1 at each side, 1 at the end. I put the envelopes under their plates. I put a small one under my own. At 5, my father texted, "Do you need me to pick up anything?" I typed, "No, thank you. Just you." At 6:30, Lena stood at the mirror by the hall and put on a pair of earrings shaped like little leaves. She looked at me in the glass. "How do I look?" she asked. Like someone I used to run toward, I thought, but what I said was, "Beautiful." At 6:45, I stepped into the garden and stood among the herbs. The air was damp, the kind that carries scent well. I closed my eyes and listened to the small noises, the distant hum of a car, a bird's thin call, a door closing on the next street. I thought about mercy, about how a gentle truth can be the sharpest thing, about how my revenge would not be flames, but the brave kind of open window. At 7, the doorbell did not ring because no one in our family rings. The door slid quietly, and my father's voice came in before he did. "Smells good," he said, cheerful, the way that word stretches like a soft sweater. Lena came from the kitchen with a dish towel over her shoulder. "Come in," she said, smiling. He kissed her cheek the way you might kiss a daughter-in-law you adore. It was both ordinary and not ordinary at all. We sat. The stew steamed and the rosemary on the napkins let out their small, stubborn scent. The string lights made the room feel like a glow in the back of a shell. I poured water into 3 glasses. My hand was steady. My chest was not. I felt the old child in me and the new woman I was learning to be, sitting side by side inside my skin. I lifted my glass. "Happy early birthday," I said. I wanted to celebrate a little, the 3 of us. It felt right. He looked touched. The lines around his eyes deepened. "Thank you," he said, his voice a little rough. He reached for the serving spoon and then paused, as if remembering a story he wanted to tell. Lena watched him with affection, her mouth soft, her eyes gentle. If I had been a stranger, I would have blessed the small gathering. We ate. We talked about nothing and everything. The weather, a book I had read and liked, the way the neighbor's new dog cried at the moon 2 nights ago and then settled after someone sang to it through a fence. My father told a story about losing his keys in a place they did not belong and finding them in the freezer hours later. We laughed. We were us and we were not. After the plates were emptied and the cake was almost gone, I pushed my chair back. The sound was soft on the floor. The night outside had become a deep, kind blue. I folded my napkin and set it beside my plate. I slid the envelopes out from under their plates and placed them on top. The small rectangle of paper looked almost tender in that light. "I wrote you both letters," I said. "I wrote them so I would not say the wrong thing in the wrong way. I wrote them because I want to be careful with you and also careful with me." Lena's face changed in a way I cannot fully explain. It did not collapse. It did not even fall. It just opened and then closed again, like a small curtain lifted by a breeze. My father looked from the envelope to my face, confusion dimming the warm light in his eyes. He reached for the letter with his name on it, but did not open it. His hands were very still. "I need to say something first," I said. My hands rested on the edge of the table, and the wood felt like an anchor. I know about you two.
The words did not crash into the room. They landed like a folded sweater placed gently on a chair. The silence after stretched out like new cotton. No one moved. The string lights hummed their small electrical hum. Somewhere in the night, a car door closed and someone laughed. Lena's lips parted. My father closed his eyes once, a slow, pained blink, like he had been waiting to be seen and was afraid of it. I did not ask questions then. I did not say how long or why or where. I had written the questions down in my letters, where they could be read slowly without the heat of a moment. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to make a scene. I won't call anyone. I wanted to tell you here, in our house, with a cake on the table and the lights soft, because I'm not trying to destroy anyone. I'm just done not knowing. Lena let out a breath she had been holding. A small sob rode the end of it like a child tucked into a coat. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice catching. My father swallowed, his throat working. His fingers curled around the envelope as if it were the only solid thing in the room. "I never meant to hurt you," he said. He had told me that before, once, when I was little and scraped my knee on a low wall he said would be safe to climb. That time, I forgave him before he finished the sentence.
"I believe that," I said, "but you did." He nodded, looking at the table, at the napkin, at anything that wasn't my face. The kitchen was so quiet I could hear the faint tick of the stove cooling, the low ring of glass when someone's bracelet brushed it. There was nothing left to keep the truth from standing up and being counted. "I have a plan," I said. "It is simple. It is not fire. It is light." They both looked at me then, the kind of looking that feels like it could tie you to the chair and also set you free. I did not break eye contact. I did not let my voice rise. I sat in the center of my own choice. "The plan is this," I said. And then I stopped there, not to be dramatic, but to breathe. "You will read what I wrote. You will go home tonight alone and think. Tomorrow, you will meet me here together at noon. We will decide what comes next. I will not be angry in a way that makes me cruel. You will not lie. We will not pretend we did not arrive where we arrived." No one argued. No one pleaded. No one slammed a fist. We were not that kind of family, even here, even now. Lena wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. My father nodded, emotion so small it could have been a tremble. The garden outside looked back at us through the glass. The rosemary, the mint, the quiet earth that had held so much. When they left, the door closed softly. The house exhaled. I stood in the kitchen and waited for my legs to shake. They did not. I went to the sink and washed 3 plates. The water made small rivers down my forearms. I listened to the night be a night, nothing more. I dried my hands on a towel and wrote in my notebook. I saw letters on a table. I heard, I know. I felt relief like a new sky. I will do rest. I slept for the first time in days. Not the sleep of someone who has found joy, but the heavy, honest sleep of someone who has told the truth out loud and let the house hear it. In the morning, I walked to the bakery and bought 3 rolls. I bought butter and a small jar of jam that smelled like summer. I set out plates and knives and a pot of tea that filled the kitchen with ginger and heat. The light through the window made the dust dance like slow snow. At 11:58, the door slid open and they walked in together. Their faces looked like the sky after rain, washed, pale, a little raw. We did not hug, we sat. I felt the smallest tremor move through me and then pass, like a bird testing a branch and deciding to fly on. Before anyone spoke, I looked at them both and said, I will not hurt you to make myself feel better.
That is not who I am. I reached for my own envelope, the one I had tucked under my plate, and slid out the note I had written to myself. I set it beside my tea as if it were a witness. They each had read their letters. I could tell by their eyes. Lena's looked red at the edges, like someone who had been to the ocean and gotten salt in them. My father's looked old, not in a bad way, just in a true way, like he knew he was a man as flawed as anyone else, not a story someone tells about a hero. We began to talk, not loud, not fast, not in circles. But that belongs to the part of my story that comes next, the part where a truth we did not want stands in the room with us and does not leave until we nod at it and say, "Yes, I see you." That is the part where my plan turns from letters into the rest of my life.
They came at noon, like I asked, on a day that smelled like rain, even though the sky was holding back. I had the table set the way I do when I want things to feel gentle. 3 plates, 3 cups, a small knife resting on butter that had been out long enough to be soft. A jar of jam sat in the middle, a deep red with sunlight caught in it. The kettle hissed and then calmed, and the room held its breath with me. We did not hug. We did not pretend this was a normal lunch. We sat, hands folded, eyes careful, the way people sit when they are about to talk about love and harm in the same sentence. I poured tea for each of us. The steam curled between us like a soft curtain. The rosemary outside the window leaned toward the glass as if it wanted to listen. "I want to do this in a way we can live with later," I said. My voice felt steady, like a spoon laid flat on a table. One of you speaks, the other listens, no interruptions. Then we switch, then I will speak. We will tell the truth and we will keep our voices kind. They both nodded. Lena's hands were ringed by the light like small moons. My father's fingers tapped once, then stilled, like a man remembering he is not a drummer. "Dad," I said softly, "you can go first." He closed his eyes for a second, the way you do when you step outside to see how cold the day really is. When he opened them, he looked at me as if I were 10 and also 40 at the same time. The way you look at your child when you need to ask for something you shouldn't have to ask for. He swallowed. "It started the night we put up the lights in your garden, your first anniversary. You were tired. You went inside to take a bath. Lena and I stayed out and tested the plugs and moved chairs and laughed because one bulb wouldn't work and then they all wouldn't work. It was nothing. It was a good night. It was a family night." He rubbed his thumb along the edge of his teacup. We sat down on the step for a minute. It was quiet. The garden smelled like mint and smoke from the neighbor's grill. I started talking about my morning walks. She talked about her new client. It was safe. And then at some point, it wasn't. Not by a mile. I do not know the exact moment. I wish I did. I would go back and stand up instead of staying seated. But I didn't. I stayed. I let a moment turn into a line I crossed. He looked down, the way a person looks at a lock they cannot open. I kissed her. That was me. I did that first. It was a soft, stupid kiss. It was wrong. She pulled back. I said I was sorry. We said it wouldn't happen again. And then it did. Not every day, not a steady thing. It was like a river that looks small and then takes your feet out from under you when you step in. The kettle ticked as it cooled. The jam jar caught the light and sent it back in a red stripe across the wood. I kept my hands still in my lap. I could tell you I was lonely. I could tell you I missed being needed in a way that made the day have a shape. I could tell you I felt like I had lost pieces of myself after your mother left and I never found them again. Those things are true, but they are not enough. None of them are enough to explain why a man lets himself steal warmth from his own child's house. He took a breath and let it out slow. It has been months, 8, 9. We would not see each other for a while. We would say, this stops now, and then something ordinary would happen. An errand, a text about the garden, a question about dinner, and the thread would catch us again. I am not proud. I am not even sure I know how to carry the shame properly. I just know I did harm. He lifted his eyes and held mine. He said, I love you. The words were plain, not a plea, not a defense. That truth sits beside the other truth, that I hurt you, and I have to hold both. I do not expect you to make room for me anywhere near your life if that is what you need. I will do what you ask. He stopped. The room did not jump to fill the space. Silence stayed and sat with us like a fourth person. I took a small sip of tea and set the cup down with care. Thank you, I said to him, because the truth, even ugly, is a kind of gift when it finally shows up. I turned to Lena. You can speak, I said. She looked younger to me in that moment, not because her face changed, but because the careful, contained layer she wears like a pretty coat had been set aside. She tucked a piece of hair behind her ear and then let her hands rest on the table. Her fingers were shaking. She placed her palms flat on the wood to steady them. I was lonely, she said, and then her mouth tightened as if the word did not fit in her new, smaller throat. That's such a simple word for something that felt heavy and stuck. I was with you, and I love you, and I also started to feel like I wasn't needed in the right places. That is not your fault. You have a big heart and a full life, and that is one of the reasons I fell for you. But sometimes I felt like a room with the lights off even when you were right there. She looked at my father, then back to me quickly like she had touched a hot stove. He was kind to me. He asked about my work and actually wanted to hear more than the headline. He told me stories about you as a kid, and I loved those stories because I loved you in them. I felt close to you through him, and then I didn't. It twisted. It turned into something I do not even want to give a name because a name makes it sound like it belongs to me in a way I want to give back.
Her voice went smaller. The first time he kissed me, I told him no. He said sorry. We said it would not happen again. It did. I should have told you. I told myself it would cause more harm to say anything. That was a lie I used to make room for the quiet. I let the secret grow legs. We were careful. We were careful in all the wrong ways. She lifted her eyes to me and did not look away. I hurt you, she said. I did something I never thought I would do. I do not expect you to make me small again or to keep me. I am not asking. I want to be honest now, even if it is this late. I let the room breathe. The clock in the hall ticked like a person walking away. Outside, a small bird landed on the fence and then flew off again before it could think about staying. I looked at my hands, at the little pale line where my ring had been sitting all morning in a way that made the skin under it soft. How long, I asked, have you both been meeting without my knowing? I kept my voice plain, the way you ask about a bus schedule. 8 months, my father said again, as if a number repeated could make it less surprising. Where? I asked. Not to hurt myself, but because I needed to know if my home was part of it. Cafes, Lena said, once at the park, once at his house. Never here. my father said, too fast in his hurry to offer that small piece of respect, and then slowed. Never in your bed. Never in your room. The chair felt solid under me, the way a good chair does when you lean your weight into it. Were you careful, I asked quietly, with your bodies, with your health, with mine? Yes, Lena said, and I believed her because there was nothing to be gained from any other answer now. I nodded. The nod felt like closing a small drawer and then opening a bigger one. Thank you, I said. My father's voice entered the space again, soft. I am sorry, he said, and it sounded like sand, like someone holding words that have been worn down by their own hands. I let that be. There was a question under all the other ones. It had waited years. It had sat on a low shelf in my mind with dust on it. And today was its day. I turned it over like a stone and let the underside see light. How long, I asked, have you both been meeting without my knowing? I kept my voice plain, the way you ask about a bus schedule. Mom leave because of you? I asked. The room tilted a degree. The question made a sound in the air like a small bell. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, there was no place for charm to stand. His face made a slow collapse, not dramatic, just honest. He nodded once. Yes, he said. She left because I had an affair. It was a woman who worked at the hardware store. It was not love. It was attention. It was a season where I did not like myself, and I liked being looked at by someone who didn't know the worst parts of me. Your mother was tired of cleaning up my sorry. She told me exactly what she needed, and I did not listen. She left, and I told you a story with no sharp edges because I did not know how to let you carry any more than you already were. I am sorry for that too. The words sat in the room with us. We moved over so they could have a chair. I looked at the jam. I thought about all the breakfasts I had eaten and all the mornings that had been soft and good because we had made them so. It is strange to be a woman sitting at her own table and also a girl sitting in a car with the radio up, pretending the wind is the only thing making your father's eyes red. Okay, I said. And it was not a pass or a forgiveness. It was a marker. It was me opening my journal in my head and writing a new line. This is the truth about my family. We sat in that for a while. The house creaked the way old houses do when you are listening to them too closely. The light shifted on the table a little. I could smell the ginger and also a thread of lemon from last night's cleaning. The life I had lived was still here. It had not been completely replaced. It had been complicated, and now it was clarified. I made a plan, I said, and I slid a plain envelope from under my plate, the one that said what comes next on the front in my tidy, careful writing. I did not push it toward either of them yet. I set it on the table like a map. I will not do the kind of revenge that burns down the house I built with my own hands. I will not be loud in a way that stings the neighbors. I will not make a storm that scares the kids at the library. My plan is simple and final and gentle, and it has 2 doors. I paused and let the image form between us. 2 doors. The air felt different. The bird on the fence returned and then flew away again as if it knew something new was happening and did not need to watch. I said, "These are the doors," and I turned the envelope and slid out 2 sheets of paper. Door 1, you choose each other. If that is your truth, you will not hide it. You will not ask me to carry it. You will be together and make a life in the light. If you walk through this door, you leave my life for a long time. There will be no contact for a year, maybe longer. I will file for divorce. Dad, you will not come by. You will return your key. You will not text me in the mornings with pictures of the sky. You will tell the people you need to tell, not because I want your shame, but because secrets are poison and I am done drinking them. I watched those words settle. Then I went on. Door 2, you do not choose each other. You stop. You go to your separate corners and you do the work that this kind of harm demands. That means therapy, not as a badge, but as a real practice. It means you don't talk for a year. It means you give me space and I decide on my own time if there is a version of us that belongs to the future. It does not mean we go back to before. Before is gone. It means we build something new, if we build it all, from the plain truth up. I pushed the papers forward, one toward each of them. The words on them were simple. I did not make them legal language. I made them human language. There were lines for signatures, but not because signatures have magic. They were there because sometimes your hand needs to feel like it agreed, when your mouth is not sure it can speak. You do not have to choose in front of me, I said. You will take these home. You will think. You will bring a note to the mail basket on my hall table tonight. You will write one sentence. It will say, door 1 or door 2. You will not ring the bell. You will slide it through the slot and you will go. Tomorrow, if you chose door 1, you will come at 9 to collect the things that belong to you from this house with dignity and with help. If you chose door 2, you will not come here for a year. I will keep this door as my door. You will keep your distance and your word. No one spoke for a moment. The room felt like a lake when the wind stops and the surface goes perfectly flat. My father reached out and touched the paper with 2 fingers, as if he were checking whether it was hot. Lena touched hers the way you touch a letter from someone you love, careful and with her eyes. Do I have a voice? Lena asked quietly, the foolish question of someone who knows the answer and is afraid to hope for it anyway.
You do, I said. You have your own door. You have your own life. You get to choose. She nodded. A tear slid down her cheek and caught on her lip. She wiped it with the heel of her hand. My father looked at me with an old man's hurt and a young man's stubbornness. 2 things that sit beside each other, whether you like it or not. May I say one more thing? He asked. You may, I said. I will do what you ask, he said. I will also go and sit with someone who helps me understand why I keep touching fire and then acting surprised by the burn. I do not want to be this man again 1 year from now. Good, I said, and it was a word that made me feel both older and somehow new. We stood at the same time, as if someone had said, rise. Chairs pushed back with soft sounds. The smell of tea lived in the room even after the cups were empty. At the door, he turned for a second, like he might say something else, and then didn't. The door slid closed behind them. The sound was smooth and almost kind. I washed the cups and dried them and put them back on the shelf, the blue one in front of the yellow one, like always. I wiped the table and folded the cloth. I stood at the window and looked at the garden. The rosemary was steady. The light had changed just a little, taking on a gray that looked like thinking. I did a small thing then that I should have done years ago. I called my mother. We have spoken over the years, but gently, like people stepping on stones across a stream, careful not to fall. This was not a day for careful. This was a day for true. I held the phone and listened to the ringing. When she answered, her voice came soft and wary, the way you answer when the past calls your name. Hi, Mom, I said. It's me. Hi, baby, she said. and the word baby hit a place in me I did not know still held a light on for it. "Do you have a minute?" I asked. "I need to ask you something." "I always have a minute for you," she said, and I believed it. I told her, not all the details, not the parts that would make anyone picture too much, but the bones of it. My wife, my father, the letters, the plan, the doors, the way the rain smelled even when it was not raining. She did not gasp. She did not ask for names or times. She made a small sound like someone whose heart has stopped and started again. She was quiet long enough for me to hear the sound of her old fridge hum. "I should have told you," she said finally. "When I left, I should have told you why in words with sharp edges. I thought I was protecting you from adult harm. I think I made it harder. I am sorry for that." Dad told me. Today. He was a good father in many ways, and he did not know how to stop needing attention like a kind of medicine. I loved him, and I left him to keep the house quiet. I have wondered for years if I did the right thing. Then I hear you, and I know you learned quiet from me and honesty from yourself. I am proud of you. I closed my eyes and let those words sit down in me. The kitchen seemed to change color, very slightly, like someone had opened a curtain I forgot was there. "What should I do?" I asked. It felt like a child's question, but it was also a woman's question. I wanted her wisdom, and I wanted my own. "Do what you have already done," she said. "Tell the truth. Do not make the hurt bigger to prove a point. Choose your peace in a way that does not punish the child inside of you. Choose the woman you are now. Make a home that is quiet because you built it, not because you emptied it of noise by leaving people out. And then rest. Let time do its work on your heart." "Will you come visit?" I asked. I did not think I would ask that. The question rose up on its own, a small brave fish. "If you want me," she said. "If you have a corner for me and a mug." "I have both," I said, and I looked at the shelf with the blue and the yellow mugs and felt a new space open between them, the size of a third. After we hung up, I sat at the table and wrote her address on an envelope. I tucked in a small note with my spare key. "Come when you can. Bring stories. Bring a simple appetite." Then I did the practical parts of my plan. I gathered documents I had already copied and put them in 2 plain folders. One folder said Door 1. Inside were steps for parting, a draft of a simple separation, the list of places we would need to call and change, names of lawyers who were kind and fair, a note about who would keep what, already generous and clear because I did not want to ever fight over a chair or a plate. The other folder said Door 2. Inside were therapy referrals, a letter to myself with questions I would bring to a counselor if I ever sat in a room with my father again, a short list of boundaries I would hold for a year, like a fence that keeps wild things from running into a road. I put both folders in the drawer by the door, where we keep takeout menus and spare batteries. I am a woman who likes a drawer that makes sense. It calmed me to know they were there, the way a flashlight in a working condition calms you during a storm. The day eased forward. I moved through it like someone moving through a house they know well after the furniture has been moved. I reached for a light switch and found my hand an inch to the left. That was okay. I learned as I went. I made a little soup for myself because feeding my body felt like a kind of love I could give without permission. At 7, the air grew heavy. The sky darkened and then decided to let its worry go. Rain began. Soft at first, then steady. It hit the window in fine threads. The sound found its way into my ribs and loosened something there.
I wiped the table again, though it did not need it. I straightened the little rug by the door. I waited for the sound. When the mail slot opened and closed, it made a small metal click. It was the simplest sound. I stood up and walked to the hall. The envelope lay on the floor like a white bird with nothing to say, only to be lifted. I picked it up. My name was on the front in Lena's handwriting, careful and tall. The back was sealed. I took it to the table, the good light on, the rain speaking at the window. I slid a finger under the flap and lifted. It was not long. A few lines written in the same careful hand, my name at the top, without any decoration. The first words were soft and changed everything.
We choose door 1, it said. We choose each other. We don't deserve to ask for any kindness, but we will take the conditions you set and we will keep them. We will not call. We will not come. We will build whatever this is in daylight and not ask you to stand in the shadow of it. We are sorry, and we know sorry is a small word for a house-sized harm. My father's name was below hers, his handwriting heavy and a little crooked, the way it gets when his hand shakes. There was a short line that was his alone. I will not make you carry my loneliness again. I will keep my promise. I set the paper down and let it be a thing in the room with me. I did not scream. I did not drop it like a hot pan. I put my hands flat on the table and felt the wood. The finish smooth under my palms from years of sandwiches and letters and cups of tea. The rain backed off to a whisper and then came back again. The way decisions feel when they circle in you and then land. I cried then, but not like a storm. My tears were slow and clean. They moved down my face and I did not swipe them away. I let them reach my mouth and taste like the sea. I breathed with them. It was not a crying that begged anything to change. It was a crying that made space. After a while, the crying stopped because I had given it room to finish. I stood up and went to the bedroom. I opened the small suitcase I had put under the bed and added a soft shirt, the one that makes me feel like I am wearing an afternoon in late spring. I took my ring off and closed my hand around it. My palm warmed it, the way warmth moves from a body into a small piece of metal. I went to the bowl by the door where we keep keys. I took out the key to my father's house. I set it on the table. It made a small sound like a spoon on a plate. I added his spare key to this house too. I took out the phone plan card and wrote the number of the credit union account I had opened on a sticky note to remind myself what tomorrow would look like. I wrote, "This is the last hard day of this part." In the quiet, I walked to the garden door and slid it open. The rain was light now, the kind you could stand in without hating it. The rosemary shone. The air smelled like the world had been washed. I stepped out without shoes. The stone under my feet was cool and honest. I stood there and lifted my face. I let a few drops hit my skin. I listened to the evening like it had something to tell me. Tomorrow, I would do simple things that would look, to a stranger, to nothing more than Saturday chores. I would change the phone plan. I would call a lawyer whose voice did not make me feel small. I would ask a neighbor to stand with me while I changed the lock, my lock on my door, to a new one that slid quiet because I know how to keep things quiet too.
I would hand them a folder in the morning and let them take whatever belonged to them. I would keep the blue mug. The yellow one, too. I would buy a third. Maybe green. I would make room for my mother's stories and my own. I went back inside and closed the door. The sound of it was, again, that smooth slide my father had given us. I ran my fingers over the edge of the wood. It will be mine now, I thought, without his fingerprints on it. Not in anger, in truth. Before I went to bed, I wrote 2 notes and put them on the hall table by the basket. One said, "You can come at 9. Bring a box, not a bag, and take your time." The other said, "Leave the keys in the dish. There is a tin on the counter with cookies. For the road. Take some." It was not soft on purpose. It was who I am. I believe you can tell the truth and still put butter on someone's bread. I turned off the kitchen light. The room fell into that sweet, dim, not dark a house has when it is full of the day's warmth. I stood a long moment with my hand on the switch. Not for any reason I could name, just because endings deserve a pause. When I lay down, the bed smelled like clean sheets. The yellow lamp pulled its small light for a minute while I read a page from my book and then closed it. I clicked the light off and stared at the shadow the string lights made against the far wall from the other room. For a second, they looked like a map of a city I had never been to and would not visit now. That was okay. There are other cities. There is a new map. There is a woman in my house who can sit with her own heart and keep it company while the rain does its work outside. I woke up early, the way you do when your life is getting ready to put on a new shirt. The air was cool and simple. The night had given what it could. I went to the kitchen and put the kettle on. I set 3 glasses of water out because tears had their way yesterday, and water helps. I took the door 1 folder from the drawer and placed it on the table. I picked up the ring I had warmed in my palm and set it on the folded cloth. A small moon on a soft night. I placed the keys beside it, pieces of metal that have let people in, now reminders that I get to decide who crosses the threshold. In that quiet, with the kettle beginning its low song, I felt the shift inside me like a door that swings all the way open. This was the moment I had planned for. Not for a big, angry ending, but for a clean one, for a final kind of boundary that keeps the garden safe and lets the rain find its own way to the earth.
They came at 9, like I asked. The morning was cool and bright, the kind of light that makes everything look clean at the edges. I had the tin of cookies on the counter. I had set a small stack of boxes by the door. I put 2 glasses of water on the table and left the door unlocked so no one had to knock. They didn't ring the bell. The door slid open with that quiet sound my father had given us, and then it would be mine. Lena stepped in first, a plain tote bag over her shoulder. Mark followed, holding a small, empty box. His eyes touched the floor, the chair, the edge of the rug. Not my face. Not yet. "Thank you for letting us do this like this," Lena said softly. Her voice trembled and then steadied. "Thank you for coming on time," I said. "There's water on the table." No one reached for it. We stood there for a breath, like 3 people in a room not sure which way to move. I pointed toward the bedroom. "Your clothes, Lena," I said. "3rd drawer, shoes in the hall, books on the shelf by the window. Take what's yours. Leave what feels like ours." She nodded, her mouth a small line I know well. She walked down the hall, her steps light, careful not to bump the frames on the wall. Mark stood there, holding the box, his hands unsure.
Photos, I said quietly. There are some of you on the living room shelf. The rest, memories of me, stay. You can have copies later if you want. Not now. He nodded. Okay, he said. The words sounded like it had been sanded down, smooth and thin. We moved around each other. I opened drawers. I set aside a scarf. I folded a sweater. I put a hairbrush in a small bag. I didn't rush. I also did not linger. When Lena picked up the framed photo from our wedding, she looked at me and asked, "This?" I said, "Leave it. I will decide later what story it belongs to." She set it back gently. The sunlight through the window made a square on the bed. Dust moved in it like slow snow. She stood very still for a moment, eyes on that square, and then she folded 2 shirts and placed them in the box. In the living room, Mark took a book from the shelf and then another. He reached for a third and stopped. It was a book he had given me when I was 19, about a woman who learns to cook alone after a life that changed. He looked at the cover and then put it back, his hand resting on it for a second like a goodbye. When they were done, they brought the boxes to the door. They put them down and stood with their hands empty. Keys next. That part was simple. Mark took his key to my house from his pocket and set it in the dish. It made a small, even sound. Lena took her copy and placed it beside his. Her hand stayed there a second too long, like she was saying something to a piece of metal. "There's a note on the table," I said. "Cookies on the counter for the road." Lena nodded. "You are kind," she said, as if the word were both heavy and light. "This is not kindness," I said quietly. "This is who I am." We stood in the small space between leaving and staying. There was so much that could be said in that thin air. There was also nothing left to say that would change the shape of it. I chose a very short line. "Take care of each other," I said. "If you're going to make me lose this, don't make it for nothing. Be good to each other. Be honest. Be the kind of people who earn what you chose." They both nodded. Mark looked up then and met my eyes. He looked older than yesterday. He said, "I love you." It wasn't a plea. It was just a true thing in a room that had not been kind to true things for a while. I said, "I know. I will always know that. It just isn't enough to keep us." Lena swallowed. She said, "I'm sorry." The words were quiet and didn't reach for anything beyond themselves. That was the only way I could take them. I said goodbye, and that word settled in the room and did not break anything. They picked up their boxes, the doors slid, the sound was smooth, polite, final. The house exhaled. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, not looking at the space where they had been, but at the light on the floor. It moved an inch. A car passed. The neighbor's wind chime made a small sound, like a memory being gentle. I made tea. I poured it into my blue mug and held it with both hands. The steam moved across my face. I sat at the table and read the note I had left for them one last time. It said, "Leave the keys, take the cookies, close the door gently, take care of each other." It looked like a note you might write to someone borrowing your lawnmower. It felt like something else. When the tea was gone, I rolled up my sleeves and changed the lock. I called my neighbor, Mrs. Patel, and asked if she could stand with me for company. She arrived in 5 minutes with a small basket of tools and a warm smile. We worked side by side at the open door, the cool air moving over our hands. The old lock came out with a few turns. The new one slid in with a satisfying click. "Listen," she said, stepping back. I closed the door and opened it again. The latch made a new sound, crisp and clean. The door still slid quietly, the way it had since my father rubbed wax on the spot. Now it was both, quiet and mine. I said, "Thank you." She touched my shoulder. She said, "You are brave." And then she shook her head a little, as if brave was not exactly the word. She said, "You are rooted." I smiled. "I like that word," I said. After she left, I made the calls. I split the phone plan. A woman with a cheerful voice on the line guided me through the steps. She said,
We'll keep your number. You'll just have your own account now." The words felt like a small ceremony. My own account, my own door, my own quiet. Then I called the lawyer whose card I had tucked in the Door 1 folder. Her office was 3 blocks from the bakery. The waiting room smelled like paper and lemon. The receptionist spoke softly, as if everyone who sat there needed gentleness. When I met the lawyer, she wore a gray cardigan and had warm eyes that did not look away when I said hard things. She guided me through forms without adding drama, without tugging at anything that didn't need to be tugged. She said, "We can be fair and firm. There is no prize for cruelty."
"I don't want a prize," I said. "I want to be done." We made lists. We wrote simple notes about the house, the accounts, the things that were ours and the things that were mine. I decided to be generous where I could. I did not want to walk through rooms years from now and feel the echo of a fight about a lamp. We drafted a short email to Lena with details and dates. I asked that we send it later in the week. "She needs a second," I said. At the community center, the kids ran small circles around me and lifted the day into motion. That afternoon, the boy who had drawn the blue house and yellow stars came in without his usual tired face. He held up a new drawing. It was a garden, with a bench, and a tree with a swing. The sky was full of tiny dots. "Fireflies," he said. "They're here when it's dark, so you know you're not alone." I felt my throat tighten in a kind way. "It's beautiful," I told him. "Can we hang it where people will see it when they walk in?" He nodded, proud. He didn't know he had handed me a small piece of grace in the middle of my day. Sometimes kindness comes like that, short and glowing. In the evening, I made soup from what was left in the fridge. I ate it standing at the counter, a thing you do when you live alone and don't mind it. The spoon hit the side of the bowl with a soft sound. I listened to the radio. A song I didn't know filled the room like warm water. I washed the bowl and watched the water spiral away. I stood there for a little while, hands on the cool edge of the sink, and I let the quiet be my friend. I started therapy 2 weeks later. The office was on the second floor of a building with a bookstore downstairs. The waiting room had a window that looked over a street with big trees. The therapist's chair was simple and soft. She poured tea when I arrived and let me hold the warm cup even when I didn't drink it. "We can start where you want," she said. "I want to start with a word. Tide." She nodded. "Tell me why." I told her about my mother and the way leaving looked in our house. I told her about the wind in the car and the sound of my father's breath. I told her about how I learned quiet and kindness like tools, and how sometimes I used them to fix what wasn't mine to fix. I told her about the message on the phone and the way my hands didn't shake, and then did later. I told her about the letters, the doors, the cookie tin on the counter, the new sound the lock makes. She listened without eyebrows lifting, without leaning forward like a person about to catch me. She let me be someone who didn't need catching. You chose yourself without choosing hate. That's rare. You're allowed to grieve what you built. You're also allowed to feel proud of how you took it apart without smashing everything. I went every week for a while. We talked about love like it was a quiet thing you make with small, daily choices. We talked about forgiveness and how it isn't a single event, but a way you let the anger drain out over time, like water leaving a tub. We talked about boundaries and how they aren't walls, but fences with gates. You decide when to open and when to keep closed. She said, write a letter to the part of you that wants to make sure everyone else is okay. Tell her she can rest. Tell her you have her job now. I wrote it at my kitchen table with tea steaming beside me. I wrote in simple words, like I was speaking to a child I love. I folded the letter and put it in the drawer with the spare batteries. I liked knowing it was there. I liked having a place to go to remind myself to be soft to me. I didn't tell many people. I told my friend Nadia from the center. We sat on a bench by the river after work, sweaters pulled up against a draft. I'm not looking for advice, I said. I just want someone to know. She nodded. I will not give you any, she said. I will give you my lap if you need to cry, and my couch if you need to sleep, and my ears anytime. I laughed a little. Your couch is uncomfortable, I said. It is, she agreed. But my soup is good. We ate soup at her place that night, thick with lentils and lemon. We watched a silly show and took turns not talking. I walked home under a sky that looked like velvet in pinpricks. I felt like a person in the world full of other people, and that was a comfort I didn't know I needed. My mother came to visit on a Sunday. She brought a quilt she had made, small hand stitches all over it, like quiet music. We put it on the couch and smoothed it together like a new skin. We cooked a simple stew and ate it at the table with the string lights on low. She told me stories I had not heard, about her grandmother's garden, about the first time she felt truly safe as a girl when a teacher put a hand on her shoulder and said, "You're okay here." After we washed dishes, we stood in the garden and planted a small lavender bush near the rosemary. The earth was cool and a little stubborn. Our hands came away smelling like the kind of days I want more of. This will grow, she said, patting the soil. It likes poor ground and it likes to be cut back. It will bloom again and again. I want that, I said, for me.
You will, she said. And for once, the promise didn't feel like a thing made of air. It felt like something we could both touch. Time did what it does. It moved without asking me how I felt about it. The house learned my new routines. I opened windows in the morning to let cool air wash the rooms. I made my bed with a new cover, soft and pale, like a small cloud. I bought a green mug, deep and simple, and put it on the shelf between the blue and the yellow. I started walking by the river before work, slow, with no goal except to watch the light roll over the water. I took a pottery class on Tuesday nights. I learned to center clay on a wheel. The trick, the teacher said, is not force. It's even, steady pressure, both hands working together. Some nights, my bowls came out lopsided. I kept them anyway. You can love a useful thing that isn't perfect. There were hard moments, too. In the grocery store once, I turned down an aisle and saw them at the far end, hands almost touching like a magnet and a piece of metal. They did not see me. I stood very still and looked at peaches. I picked up 3 and put them into a paper bag. My heart was loud for a minute and then quieted. I paid for the peaches and went home and ate one over the sink. The juice ran down my wrist and I laughed a little, because for some reason it felt like a small joy I could hold with 2 hands. The divorce moved through steps, papers, signatures, a date on a calendar. On that day, I wore a soft dress and comfortable shoes. I sat on a bench outside the courthouse and watched people come and go. Inside,
The clerk stamped a few pages with a sound like a careful hammer. It took less time than a haircut. It took more from me than I want to measure. I walked out into the sun and stood there with my eyes closed. Then I went to the bakery, bought a small slice of lemon cake, and ate it at a table by the window. The cake tasted bright and clean. I wrote in my notebook, "This part is complete. You did not break." The year passed. Seasons folded over each other. Summer light, fall leaves, winter quiet, spring trying again. The lavender filled in and made a small cloud by the rosemary. The string lights aged a little and still glowed when I turned them on. I read good books and a few bad ones. I learned to love my own company in the evening, the way the house sounds when it settles, the click of the new lock when I am the one turning it, the steady hum of the fridge at night. I made dinner for friends. I let them bring bread and stories. We sat in the glow and laughed softly. The house had its hum again. I didn't keep a countdown, but I knew when a year was there. It arrived like a gentle knock at the back of my mind. On that morning, there was a letter in my mailbox with my father's handwriting on it. The envelope was plain. The stamp was crooked. My hands held it without shaking. I took it to the table and put it down. I made tea, and then I opened it. He wrote simply. He said he was still in therapy. He said that he had learned that wanting to be needed is not the same as being needed in the right way. He said he and Lena were living together in a small place near the park. He said he did not expect anything from me. Then he wrote one line that felt like a hand carefully placed on a table, open, not reaching. "If you want, I would be honored to sit with you on a bench for 20 minutes and listen to whatever you want to say. If you do not, I will stay away as long as you ask." I folded the letter and unfolded it and folded it again. I looked at the garden through the window. The lavender held its place. The lavender moved a little in a small wind. I thought about anger and how it used to take a seat at my table when no one invited it. I thought about the kind of forgiveness I had been practicing, not the kind that brings people back into my daily life too soon, but the kind that loosens the rope around my ribs. I wrote back the next day, a short note. Yes, 20 minutes, the bench by the lake, Saturday at 10. When I got there, the air smelled like last night's rain. A thin layer of fog hovered over the water like breath. He was already sitting. He stood when he saw me and then sat again quickly, as if he was trying to make the right choice between welcome and respect. He looked older. He also looked softer, as if time had sanded the sharp places.
We didn't hug. We sat side by side with our hands in our laps. The ducks made their busy little tracks on the water. A child on a scooter rolled past and then back again, his small wheels clicking on the seams in the path. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You're welcome," I said. My voice was my own, not the voice of a hurt child or a forgiving mother. Just me. We talked about simple things first. The weather, the tree with a nest in it, the way the city had changed a little. He told me about a book he had read and liked. I told him about the pottery class and how I finally made a bowl that was almost round. Then we talked about us. He apologized again, not with new words, but with a different kind of quiet around them. He did not ask me to say I forgave him. He did not try to measure my pain with a ruler he brought from his own toolbox. "I forgive you," I said anyway, because I needed to put the word in the air between us. Not to give you anything, to give it to myself. I don't want to carry this like a heavy bag anymore." He nodded. He looked at his hands and then at the knot of the little branch in front of us. His eyes filled and he wiped them with the back of his hand. "I will live the rest of my life in a way that tries to honor that," he said. "I don't want you in my daily life. Not now. Maybe not ever in that way. I want my house quiet. If we speak, it will be sometimes, and we will talk about things that belong in the light. I will not meet with Lena. I wish her health. I do not want to be in a room with her. That is a line." He nodded. "I can keep that line," he said. "Thank you for telling me the shape of the road." We sat for a while with the truth between us. 20 minutes passed, and then we let them pass a little more, because sometimes kindness looks like not watching the clock. When we stood, he opened his arms a little like a question. I stepped forward and let him hold me for one count of breath. His shoulder felt like it did when I was small and fell asleep on him on the couch. Then we let go. "Take care," I said. 2 small words that held a lot. "I will," he said. He did not say, "See you soon." He did not say, "Call me." He walked one way. I walked the other. The world did not shift under our feet. It held steady. On the way home, I stopped by the library. In the window, there was a poster with a photo of me sitting with a circle of kids, a book open in my lap. The caption said, "Storytime, Saturdays at 11. Their eyes were bright, my mouth was open in a laugh. I looked like someone whose life had room for joy and work and soup and good bread. I stood there for a second, smiling at that woman. Then I went inside. I read to a dozen kids. I did all the voices. They laughed in the places I hoped they would. A small girl with a purple bow climbed onto my lap without asking and leaned into me like I was a chair she trusted. I held her gently and read about a bear that learned to sleep without fear. When the hour was up, they ran out into the day like released birds. I put the book back on the shelf and closed my eyes and let the quiet sit with me like an old friend. When I got home, the house smelt like lavender and clean air. I took the green mug off the shelf and made tea. I carried it to the garden and sat on the low step. Bees did their slow work nearby. The rosemary was full. I leaned back and let the sun find my face through the leaves. My chest felt open, not like a door with a broken latch, like a window you meant to open and finally did. I thought about revenge then, the word that sounds like a metal tool. I had promised myself I would plan it, and I had. It did not look like fire or broken dishes. It looked like truth in daylight. It looked like 2 doors and a cookie tin. It looked like a lock that makes a new sound and a woman sleeping through the night. It looked like a clean table and a 3rd mug on the shelf. I do not know if Lena and my father will last. I do not need to know. If they do, I hope they learn to be kind in the places where they made harm. If they don't, that will not be my story to carry. My story is this. I stood in my own house, in my own life, with my hands steady. I chose light. I chose quiet. I chose me. The lavender moved in a small wind. A neighbor's door closed down the street with a soft click. Somewhere a kettle hummed in another kitchen. I lifted my mug and took a sip. It tasted like ginger and honey and something else I didn't have a word for yet. Maybe it was peace. Maybe it was just the taste of a morning where the truth lived in the same room as the sunlight and didn't ask for anything more than a place to sit. Some mornings still begin with rain. It taps the window in a gentle way, like someone who knows your house. The kettle hums its soft song. The kitchen smells like ginger tea and clean air. I stand by the counter with my green mug and watch the garden wake up. The door makes a new sound now when it closes. It is crisp and clean, and it still slides quietly the way it always did. I like that mix. Old and new, kind and firm. I lock it with my own hand and feel the simple weight of that little turn. It is a small thing and a big thing at the same time. My life is not loud. It moves like a river that knows where it is going. I go to the community center. I set out crayons. I hang the drawing of fireflies near the door. Kids run in and the room fills with warm noise. A small boy once told me, "You read like a hug." I smiled and said thank you and felt something settle in my chest like a bird finding a branch. At home, I keep simple habits. I open the window to let fresh air move through the rooms. I water the lavender and the rosemary and breathe in their clean smell. I sit on the step in the late afternoon and let the light touch my face. I eat good bread with butter. I call my mother and listen to her laugh about small things. We do not skip the hard parts, but they do not hold the whole evening. Sometimes when it rains, I listen to the drops slide down the glass and I remember that first message on her phone. The shape of that moment is softer now. The pain did not vanish, but it learned to sit down and be quiet. It does not run the house. It gets a chair in the corner and a blanket. I am kind to it, and I am the one who sets the rules. I think about revenge and smile a little, not because it was a joke, but because the word changed for me. My revenge was not fire, it was light. It was the way I turned on a lamp and asked the truth to come sit at the table. It was 2 doors and a tin of cookies for the road. It was a lock I changed with steady hands and a neighbor by my side. It was a blue mug, a yellow mug, and a new green one between them, making room. I also think about forgiveness. It did not arrive like a parade. It came like rain after a long, dry day, slow, thin, honest. It did not ask me to forget. It did not ask me to open my door right away. It asked me to put down the heavy bag and walk easier. On a bench by the lake, my father cried with his eyes, and I let 20 minutes be enough. Sometimes, enough is the kindest word we have. If you stood in my kitchen today, you would not see anything special. A simple table, a small vase with 3 stems, a stack of mail in a basket, 2 pairs of shoes by the door. You would hear the quiet. You would smell tea and a little lemon. You might hear the garden breathe. You might feel the way the room holds its own peace. "Are you okay?" my mother asks me sometimes, not because she doubts, but because she cares. "I am," I tell her. "I'm more than okay. I feel like myself." That is the real ending. Not the paper with stamps, not the boxes, not the door closing with a soft sound. The ending is a woman who found her center and stood in it. The ending is me in my own house, with my own key, making soup in a clean pot and laughing at a show with a friend, and reading to children and sleeping through the night. The ending is not hard. It is quiet and true. The lesson is small and simple, the way a seed is small and simple. Choose light. Tell the truth without breaking your own heart to do it. Make a plan that you can live with later. Ask for help. Put butter on the bread even when you're sad. Keep a garden, even if it is just a pot of mint on a windowsill. Call your people. Be gentle. Be firm. Let time do its work. On the first big rain of spring, I stood in the garden with bare feet. The stone was cool. The rosemary shone. The neighbor's wind chime sent out a low, kind note. I lifted my face and let the rain touch it. I closed my eyes and said, not loudly, just a whisper to the green and the gray and the clean air, thank you. That is how I end this story, not with a door slammed, but with a door closed gently, not with a shout, but with a steady voice, not by winning, but by choosing. I chose a life that feels like peace. I chose a house where truth can sit at the table and not be afraid. When the kettle hums and the rain starts up and the garden holds its breath and then releases it, I know this for sure. I did not burn my life down. I lit a light and I walked forward.